US forces have also been supporting the war against Al-Shabaab in Somalia, training special units and sometimes launching attacks targeting senior commanders of the group. Andrea Arenas reports from Washington.
Over the past several years, Washington has recognized the threat posed by Al-Shabaab and broadly adopted a two-pronged strategy on the military side. Firstly, it has funneled hundreds of millions of dollars into the African Union force known as AMISOM. It has also conducted multiple strikes on senior leadership figures. Though in isolation, those raids have been largely successful, this two-pronged strategy has not succeeded in undermining Al-Shabaab. So recent reports of U.S. forces supporting Somali and AMISOM troops conducting ground operations against militant groups indicates a growing priority to strengthen the ability of select local forces to effectively undermine Al-Shabaab on the ground.
There's a realization now, an appreciation that Shabaab is resilient and is still a threat, that the Somali National Army requires great assistance, and in fact, AMISOM is overstretched, and that even without high-value targets, Shabaab forces are gathering with enough consistency that they pose a regional threat.
President Obama shows no signs of changing tactics and committing conventional U.S. forces to fight on various fronts in Africa against offshoots of ISIL and al-Qaeda-linked militants. But he has shown that he is willing to utilize U.S. drone, helicopter, and aircraft capabilities to target militants and support local forces. Much of this activity is in the hands of the CIA and Special Operation Forces and will therefore remain mostly covert. But recent events across the continent suggest that the remaining months of the Obama presidency, the U.S. is more willing to commit specialized forces to respond to several growing threats, and this tactical framework across Africa will stay in place in areas where terrorist threats are potent.
Now, Somali forces say they're making gains in the fight against Al-Shabaab. A series of commando raids backed by U.S. forces has seen the militant group lose small towns and villages in Lower Shabelle region. CCTV's Abdulaziz Bilo has more.
Somali elite commandos have intensified raids on key Al-Shabaab bases, most of them in the Lower Shabelle region, an area considered for long as a stronghold for the militant group. The country's army says it has seized a number of small towns and villages in that same region. Aided by US and African Union troops, the commandos raided and retook Barire, a small town located some 60 kilometers southwest of the capital. While the American government hasn't commented on the Barire raid, it's not the first time the US military has intervened in the fight against the Al-Shabaab in Somalia. They've recently also stepped up their aerial support in the region. Somali authorities have welcomed the raid. They are hoping that the momentum will be maintained and that the Al-Shabaab will be weakened ahead of elections planned for later in the year. Abdulaziz Bilo, CCTV, Hargeisa, Somaliland.
And for more on this, we're joined by Abdul Wahab Sheikh Abdi Samad, Somali Affairs commentator. Abdul Wahab, thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you.
So the U.S. forces have been involved in launching attacks against Al-Shabaab, specifically been targeting senior commanders. Has this helped in the fight against the group?
Absolutely not. You know, taking out 3 to 4, Al-Shabaab military commanders and killing them or eliminating them or even kidnapping them will not eliminate the threat comes from the Islamic militant group towards the entire region. That's one issue. Secondly, no matter how much Obama administration invests the proxy forces within Somalia, that does not ease the chronic instability or chronic conflict inside Somalia until both the Somali government, the American policymakers come up a comprehensive political solution rather than military might.
Right.
For instance, if those special forces trained by the Americans, if anything to go by, why can't they guide the government installations in Mogadishu so that they can easily secure the Somali government base in Mogadishu rather than going there? That's one issue. Secondly, that's the failure of AMISOM peacekeeping force. AMISOM peacekeeping force have been in Somalia for the last 9 years. Many observers, many scholars, many policymakers are asking for how the 22,000 strong AMISOM peacekeeping force does not defeat 5 to 7,000, village boys who doesn't have a proper training, that's what people are asking for. 9 years now is more than enough.
Right.
That's why America now, they're changing the tactics. They're training Somali special forces, which can serve first the interests of Americans rather than the interests of Somalis. And those forces, they're taking instruction from the Pentagon rather than Somali Defense Ministry.
Right.
That's exactly the point of contention. How long the Somali training forces can train the American forces so that they can easily control and maintain the law of order in that country.
Yeah, something very interesting you touched on when you're talking about the AMISOM troop, 22,000 against, say, perhaps a group of 10,000 village boys, like you called them. What's really the situation on the ground? Because one minute we hear reports that Al-Shabaab has been severely weakened. The next minute we hear of an attack or an explosion right in the heart of the capital, Mogadishu. Is it that the group has lots of sympathizers? There's no goodwill on the ground, or what's the situation?
Nina, you must understand the Somali culture and norms. Somalis are a nomadic society. Almost 60% of the Somali population live in countryside, where Al-Shabaab are controlling. 40% are living in big towns.
Yeah.
This is the point of contention now. So they are controlling the population, almost 60%, so they can easily regroup and pose a threat to the African peacekeeping force. Again, 9 years staying in Somalia, doing nothing. Somalis, when the African peacekeeping force came to Somalia, Somalis were so euphoric because African brothers and sisters, they came and to help the situation. But unfortunately, now they became part and parcel of the problems. Now, leave alone, you're helping the Somali communities. Now, look what happened in Janale, just July this year, where the Ugandan forces is being attacked by Al-Shabaab. Look what happened in Lego, in 130 kilometers from southwest of Mogadishu, whereby your Burundian peacekeeping force is stationed. Look recently what happened in El Ade. So the question is, they have what they call a unified strategy, against Al-Shabaab. This is what security experts are asking for. But again and again, when the Americans, they have seen it, the American peacekeeping forces are failing. Now they started training the special forces for Somalis who can handle these issues. But again, killing specific people doesn't help the situation.
So then what is needed? What is needed for these Al-Shabaab menace to be done away with?
Simple, very simple question. Build the capacity of Somali security forces. Build the Somali government institutions. Build what you call train the Somali security forces. Let Americans train the Somali security forces. Somali Army Forces, Somali Navy, Somali Air Force. They can easily, they can easily defeat Al-Shabaab. But who cares now? Who cares? The main concern is just what they call the American security concern in Somalia, rather than Somali security concern themselves. The only way we can defeat Al-Shabaab is when we lift the embargo of the Somali security forces, when the Americans train the Somali security forces, when the Americans build the Somali institutions, Somali government institutions. In that sense, they can easily overcome the problem of Al-Shabaab.
Is there goodwill on the ground with
It
the ordinary
is.
Somali
It
citizens?
is a lot of good coming from on the ground.
Yeah.
Look here, the American security forces are training the significant number of the Somali forces. That itself is a good gesture. It doesn't exist 10 years or 5 years ago. So why they continue the same project? The same project, Alpha Group, Gashan Group, what you call the Gashan Group, Somali commandos, who now they are specifically targeting the Somali militant group inside Somalia.
Right.
So this is what they call the right action comes too late.
All right, let's leave it there. Thank you very much
Thank
for
you
those
so much.
insights. We had in studio Abdi Wahab Sheikh Abdi Samad, a Somali affairs commentator.